Hi friends, so today I'm going to discuss how to get a J1 visa. And as many of you may know that if you are seeking a postdoc position in the US, and even in some cases if you are going for a student position or an internship or something like that, you may need to get a J1 visa. So let's discuss about the J1 visa and some of its properties and how you can get it. So essentially the J1 visa is given for exchange workers. So there is a plethora of occupations which classify for exchange workers. Some of the ones which are more relevant to us include researcher, professor, teacher, nurses, etc. So essentially an exchange worker is somebody who comes to the US, and the theory behind the exchange worker concept is that there may be people who are going out to those foreign countries from US, and so this is kind of like an exchange program between a country and the United States. So typically there are some aspects which are involved in this visa. There is something known as a service fee, so you have to pay this fee. There is also the visa fee, which is an extra fee for this visa, so you essentially have to pay two types of fee. Now once you secure a position in a typical US university, they will issue you a form known as the DS-2019 form. This form is very important, and this is the form which you actually show to the consular officer when you apply for the J1 visa. So this form essentially contains a lot of information about your exchange program. It gives a description of your work, rather a brief description. It says what is your position. It may say you are a teacher or you are a professor or something like that. It gives the start and end date for your visit. It gives the category for the visit. Sometime it gives the cost of the program and so on. Now one of the things about this DS-2019 form is that you should always carry this form with yourself, whether you are carrying your passport or not. So whenever you are entering the US on the J1 visa, make sure that you bring your particular DS-2019 form with you, because the officer who is there at the customs department or immigration department is going to take a look at your DS-2019 form and your J1 visa. So I know some people who actually forgot to bring that DS-2019 form, or who packed it into their checked luggage. That's not something you want to do, so I'm warning you in advance. Now one more thing which the J1 visa DS-2019 form tells you is whether you are subject to the 2-year requirement or not. Now this is one of the problems with the J1 visa, is that there is a requirement that if you come to the US on this visa and you go back, then you have to serve a 2-year time in your country before you come back once again. So this is enforced quite strictly in most situations, and there are 3 cases for this. One of the cases is that it could be that it's part of the requirement of the fellowship you are getting. Maybe it is based on some funds which are coming from your home government, so your government wants you to go back. It could be you are in a set of skills which are specified by your country, and these skills are somewhat restricted. They are in short supply in your country, so your country actually wants you to go back and serve time there. And you need to keep in mind which of these subjects work for you. That's going to be specified in the DS-2019 form, and it's very hard to actually get a J1 visa waiver or a J1 waiver for the 2-year situation, because generally once you sign certain forms, the US government is pretty strict regarding those situations. So make sure before you take the J1 visa that you know about the 2-year requirement situation. Now in the case of many students, it's probably a better idea to get the F1 visa. So if your university is trying to tell you to go for a J1 visa, then you may actually want to negotiate with them to go for the F1 visa, because the F1 visa has a F1 practical training possibility, where after you finish your degree you can work for some time in any industry or company for practical training. And this is a very useful part of the education, because as you know, all education is not theoretical and university based. A lot of things are learned in company, especially if you are in the STEM field. So if you are in the engineering, sciences, even business management domain, then the practical training can be very useful for you. Now, I got the J1 visa twice. Once I got it as part of a Fulbright fellowship, and the second time I came for a sabbatical, which was largely a teaching sabbatical, and then I got the J1 visa. Now, if you are getting any grant from the state government or the US State Department, then your Fulbright visa type situation is free. So when I had got the Fulbright visa, my J1 visa was free. So that's something you can take advantage of. But in case you are coming to a regular position, like you are coming to a position in a US university, it's like a regular job, then you have to pay for the different visa categories and so on. So all these things like the service fee, the visa fee, and so on, it's all up to you. Now, there are certain special situations in the J1 visa which are not there, I think, in many of the different visas. One of them is that there is a English proficiency requirement. So in some cases, this may be just resolved by somebody like the department chairman calling you and ensuring that your English is sufficiently good that you can do the tasks which have been assigned to you. There is also a requirement that you get health insurance, and I think this is a generally good requirement, because if you are coming to the US, in general you should have health insurance, though in the case of many visas it's not required. This is in contrast to European situations where if you are going for any Schengen visa or something like that, you need to show that you have health insurance coverage. But in general, it's a good idea to buy some health insurance if you are coming to the US. Now, let's talk about some aspects of actually getting this visa when you go to the consulate. So essentially, you have to set up an appointment, you have to fill the form, and essentially once you fill the form on the web page, you schedule an appointment with the consulate, you land up there, and then you come face to face with the visa officer. Now, one of the things you are going to be surely asked is why are you exactly seeking this particular job or position in the US? And also here, remember that the consular officers are quite intelligent about the different aspects of research and education, and they are going to ask you specific questions to make sure that you are the person who is actually going to implement the task and you can do it quite well. So the first thing they are going to test you for is your proficiency in the English language. They are also going to ask you some questions about the program you are going to, what kind of research are you going to do, what are your plans about the research, and so on. In case you are going for a teaching type of position, they are going to ask you the various courses which you are going to teach. And in fact, sometimes the officers who interview for J1 positions, they are quite knowledgeable about the higher education system, and so they ask very specific questions. For example, they may ask you, if you are planning to teach mechanical design, then what are the parts of mechanical design you are going to teach, and what book are you going to follow, and various probing questions. So through these probing questions, they essentially figure out if you are a legitimate candidate or not. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, one of the reasons why people have problem in getting any visas, or J1 visa in particular, is that they do not seem to be well prepared for the position they are applying for. So in those cases, it is very likely the consular officer is going to make a decision to deny you the visa, because they probably feel that even if you get the visa and go to the US, you are not going to be able to successfully take part in the program, because maybe your English language skills are not up to the mark, maybe you do not have a good background in the subject, and so on. So that's something to keep in mind. So this was my take on the J1 visa. Remember, very important thing is the DS-2019 document. In fact, this document is so important that you need to save this document for posterity, because if you later apply for any different type of visas where immigration is required, then you have to make sure through these documents as to whether the 2-year residency requirement applied to you, and the people are going to ask you for these particular forms. So safeguard all your DS 2019 forms. Make sure what it says. If it says you have to fulfill a 2-year requirement in your home country, go back to your home country and try to fulfill these requirements. This requirement is very specific, so you have to go back to your home country. You cannot go back to a third country and so on. So for example, if you are an Indian national who has come to the United States, it means you have to go back to India and serve 2 years there. You cannot go to Canada and serve 2 years there, or you cannot go to UK and serve 2 years there. You can of course continue with new postdoc possibilities in Canada and UK and so on, but if you want to come back to the United States, then you will have to go for the 2-year requirement. So if you later want to come back and get a different visa, then you have to serve that 2-year sentence which has been meted out to you. So be careful about the J1 visa, and if you take it, then I wish you have a good time in the US. See you soon.